All right, everybody, what's going on? It's Wednesday night. We are live, and I am here with somebody who, by time we are done talking tonight, we're going to be best friends. We're going to be brothers. We're going to be drinking beers, drinking wine, and shooting the shit and telling war stories about the music business, the wrestling business, the podcast business, and fucking life in general. Because, hey, that's what we do. So let me welcome to the show the one and only, the rock star himself, Mr. Robby Vegas. What's going on?
What's up, man? Thanks for having me. That was an awesome intro. Like I was just sitting here in awe. I was like, well, I can't wait to see who he's talking to.
Is he talking about me?
uh,
Oh, dude. You know what? It's crazy because, mutual friend of ours, Dawn from Hey Oh You Rockers out there.
mhm.
You've done her show a few times,
Yes.
and like she kept saying, you gotta talk to Robbie. You gotta talk to Robbie. I'm like, I know. I'm trying to fit it in my schedule, and then you got this new amazing single out, Break Free.
Thank you. I
So
appreciate that.
I'm like, all right, I gotta try to squeeze into my schedule. And then like I start like in between my crazy hectic life, I'll be like, all right, let me like check something out. And I like look up Robbie and I'm like, oh, this motherfucker's a wrestler. And then I'm like, he's a fucking podcaster. And then I'm like, let me listen to Break Free. And I'm like, this is a really fucking cool tune. I'm like, what? I'm like, I got to talk to Robbie. I got to get the whole deal on this dude because he's got an interesting thing going on. And when you have, it's funny because when you talk to people who are, they have their toes dip into multiple different facets of the entertainment business.
Yeah.
I say to myself, which the hell one came first?
Wow. Well, as far as actually getting started in it, or as far as what I enjoyed first.
What did you enjoy? Let's do both. What did you enjoy first? Let's go there.
So, music and wrestling kind of came almost hand in hand, but I do remember music being slightly before wrestling, but not by much because
Okay.
when I was a kid, my uncles were really big into music. My whole family's big into music, but
Sure.
the reason I say my uncles were because they started giving me all their old vinyls,
Right.
and when they were giving me those things, the first two things I discovered were that I love the Beatles and that Kiss were superheroes. And and I fell in love with Kiss Alive 1, and I fell in love with the Beatles, Abbey Road, and well, everything from both bands now. But
Sure.
that really like was the first thing in my life that I was like, I love this, and I was young. I'm talking like 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
And then you know not too long after that, my first memories of what I like to watch on TV or like toys that I like to play with was wrestling.
Mhm.
And I remember watching, the Saturday morning superstars and all that stuff. And I actually remember watching the very first Monday Night Raw ever. And yeah, it was one of those things where they were so close together and they were two things that I fell in love with so early on. And then I ended up like never losing my love for either one.
Now, okay, let me ask you this because we are like it's like looking in a mirror. You're a thinner version. I'm a better looking version.
Okay,
but
yep.
but then here's a problem I've faced myself with
Hmm.
both because in a parallel world like with me it was music first.
Okay.
Found the music business first.
Hmm.
Um, for me, it was actually Tony Orlando and Dawn, which led to Sean Cassidy, which led to Kiss.
Mm.
Craziness. A little bit of 70s. I didn't discover the 80 wrestling until about 81, 82.
Hmm.
But once, so for me, it was in the 80s, I was trying to be, and I always say this, I was trying to be a rock star. I wasn't trying to be a musician. I was trying to
Yeah.
be a rock star.
Yeah.
Mistake number one. Um, come fast forward 1990, I'm like, well, this isn't really working. And I am, as much as I'm better looking than Robbie, I'm not as thin as Robbie. And you don't see many. fat, chubby, overweight rock stars. So I sold all my equipment, went to wrestling school.
Oh
Now,
wow.
I've always had this problem from day one.
Hmm.
Like, my love for either doesn't subside,
Hmm.
but if I am in a music mode where if I'm playing in a band or whatever, like, then I'm like all music.
Yeah.
But like right now, I'm working on all this wrestling stuff. So again, I get back all wrestling, and the music kind of takes a back seat.
Hmm.
How do you, a person who truly loves both, do
Yeah.
you feel, do you have that subsidation going back and forth, or are you able to have an even divide?
Well, it actually has changed over the years because I first broke into the music business when I was 13.
Wow. Okay.
That's the first time I actually got paid to play, and from then on, I was playing in clubs and bars and things that I had no business being in because I wasn't old enough. So I had a very like different childhood as far as like my teen years and my high school life because I was a
Okay.
musician and I was playing in clubs and bars, and that's what I did with my time outside of school. And by the time I started wrestling, I was in my early 20s,
Okay.
and I was starting to get burned out on music, not because I didn't love music, but because of all the broken promises and
Sure.
the maybe
The business.
contracts and yeah, the business itself. Like, here's a contract, just kidding. You're playing with this band. No, you're not. Like, stuff like that. And so when I started wrestling, I actually stopped playing with a full band and I started just doing acoustic shows because it was easier for me. I didn't have to deal with anybody but myself,
Wow.
and then that way I could still play my music, but I could go out and focus on wrestling too. And I did that for a long time. And every now and then I would still jump up with a band, or I would have a show here and there with a full band. And then when my wrestling career started to take off pretty good, it was like solely focused just on wrestling for the longest time. But
Mm.
in recent years, my love of music came back so hard and so heavy that, I put out the Angels and Demons EP, and then I
Okay.
put up my Whispers in the Dark EP, and then Break Free just came out a couple weeks ago. And now I'm so divided between the two. And this summer, I actually took off and turned down a few wrestling bookings to do music related things.
Mm.
And I do love both equally, but I could feel that passion that I originally had for music really burning up and coming back hard because, I did enjoy it. I started so young and I got burned out on it so fast.
Sure.
And, those were, could be considered peak years that I missed. So now it's like, trying to juggle both, but giving both equal attention to.
Okay. So you said there, you know, going through the music business stuff
Hmm.
kind of burns you out on it.
Yeah.
And the wrestling business is probably like it seems like I've been an outsider because I walked away for many years, but
Hmm.
it seems like, I mean, the wrestling business was batshit fucking crazy,
Yeah.
off the hook. But it seems like now it's a little more tame.
Hmm.
But how do you go from dealing with that? You went through burnout of the music business, and then you put yourself in the wrestling business, and I was kind of blind to it. I'm sure you probably were too. And then once you start getting in the trenches, you're like, oh, this is fucking even crazier than the music business.
It is, and it can be. And I think when I first jumped in, I was just so relieved to be trying something that I never thought I would try and doing something new. And then, over time, when you're in it, you start to navigate. Like at first, everything's all roses, right? Like, oh my
Yeah,
God, I'm becoming a professional wrestler, and I never
sure.
thought I would, and yada yada. And then you start getting bookings, and then you start getting paid, and then people start to know your name, and you're like, oh, this is really cool. And then you start realizing, like, yeah, I've met some of the greatest people I've ever met in my entire life in the wrestling business, and I've also met some of the worst. Like it is such a sleazy, nasty business at times, and it is very similar to navigating through the music business. But the
Yeah.
difference with wrestling is, I mean, I was in a tag team for a little while, but I mainly have to worry about myself. Whereas is when I was navigating the music business, I had to think about my whole band because I was writing the songs and the front man and the singer and all,
Okay.
and it was tough to navigate it for five guys. And then when I got to wrestling, it was okay. I just have to focus on this and worry about myself. So it felt like a little bit of a break at first, but they are pretty equal. Like once you get going in it.
it's funny. Like at times, I would say to myself, like, how is it I breathe the same air as some of these people? like, like I don't understand how we're both human because it's ungodly. Some of these people.
It is, and it's moments in wrestling that keep you in the business where you start to feel that burnout, and you're like, I'm done, like, I'm out of here, I'm going to wrap it up, and then something happens, and you're like, oh God, I love this so much, and it just pulls you right back in, you know.
It's funny because both businesses have such similarities, and you probably say the same thing about the music business. Like, all right, I think I'm just going to like, and then it's like, zoop, you're pulled back in.
Yeah, 100%. And you never know what it's going to be either. Like sometimes it's a match, sometimes it's a crowd reaction, sometimes it's getting to work with somebody you really want to work with. Sometimes it's a call to come in and do something with WWE. Like you don't know. And it's the same thing with music. Like you start to get burned out, burned out, burned out, and then you get that phone call to open up for whoever, and you're like, I'm in. You know.
Yeah, yeah. So now you had mentioned too, like, um, at one point in time you were devoting a lot of time to the wrestling business and
Hmm.
kind of like music took a major backseat to you. But at
Hmm.
that time, were you still dabbling? Were you still writing, still playing, or did you just close the guitar case and away?
I was still playing, just not as much, and I definitely wasn't writing as much because there was a point before wrestling, and even when I first started wrestling, that I was just a songwriter. So I would sit down and just write, whether it be lyrics, music, melodies, constantly. For a while there, I didn't do that at all. I just played the songs that I had already written, and I played a bunch of covers, and that was even rare to see me out doing that. Sometimes I do like duet shows. Other times it would just be me, and then very rarely I'd do something with the band. And I was just that burned out that I was almost angry. It was one of
Mm,
those things where it was like, even the thought of doing it again, I was like, for what? And I will admit that that was a mistake on my part, and it was because I started so young and I'd already been doing it for a decade by the time I was 23, that I was like, I'm sick of the lies and the broken promises and the sleazy
yeah,
promoters, so I'm going to get into wrestling where there's lies and broken promises and sleazy promoters.
it's a mirrors. It really is.
Yeah, yep.
That's so funny. So now I've gone through, like you said, like the anger part. Have you had your bitterness towards both businesses?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I got over it with music eventually. With wrestling, same. Like I hit it pretty hard at one point where I was just kind of getting real bitter. I try my best not to be now, but
Yeah.
and that's partially due to running my own wrestling school. So I don't want that to rub off on my students. None of us do. None of the coaches do,
Yeah.
and so it's one of those things where, myself and Vince Valor and Delson Alexander, who are coaches at the school, we try not to let any bitterness seep through. And I think it kind of makes us take a step back and lose some of that bitterness too. And, there's always going to be things we don't like. When you've been in the wrestling business for a long time, you start to form, more heavy duty opinions on the things going on around you.
Yeah.
But, there's times to step back and just be a fan and look around and say, can you believe the stuff that I've gotten to do, and the people that I've gotten to work with, and in TV time, and it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. So all right. So um, you talked music. Your first loves of music was the
Hmm.
Beatles and the superheroes of Kiss.
Hmm.
How about wrestling? Who was your first?
Oh, Shawn Michaels.
Okay.
Even back when they were in the Rockers. Now, when I was a kid, the Rockers were just splitting.
Okay.
Um, and I still, like, Sean was always my dude. And then, growing up to the, before the Attitude Era, when it was the new generation,
Hmm.
Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Diesel, Razor Ramon, Undertaker, those were the guys for me. And I also had a huge love for some guys that came before them, like Texas Tornado,
Yeah.
Kurt Hennig, Jake the Snake Roberts, Macho Man Randy Savage. So I got a nice, mix there. And then as, of course, time goes on and you get to the Attitude Era and beyond, I start looking at guys like Edge, Jeff Hardy.
Mhm.
But when people ask me about, wrestling, Sean is always going to be, my biggest influence. And, the first time I met him was probably one of the only times in my life that I actually was starstruck.
Mm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, how was that meeting? Your wrestling hero.
Well, the crazy thing about that is that the first time
Because
I
I
met
I I know how Sean used to be.
Well, so here's the thing is so the first time I met Sean is the first time that WWE had called me to come in and do some extra work.
Okay.
So it was in Columbus, Ohio,
Okay.
and I had walked in and they told me to go to the talent relations office and everybody would get me squared up and whatever paperwork for being on television and all that stuff. So I had knocked on the door and I heard a familiar voice say, "Just a minute." And I was like, no way. And Sean opens the door and we're just standing there face to face. And I was just like, oh my God. And I put my hand out as we do in the wrestling business,
Sure.
we always. And he goes, "I'm Sean." And I just said, "I know." And then I was like, and then I was like, yeah. And then I introduced myself and, he was like, "Enjoy yourself, yada, yada," gives me the spiel. And then I talked to him a bit later, and we were just kind of like joking around together in the hallway. And he told me, "You got a good look and all that stuff." And he's just really nice, really friendly. And he was like, "Just listen, pay attention, because you got a good look going, and I've heard good things." And he walked off, and I was like, "Whoa!" And that was the first day that I met him. I just happened to have two run-ins with him, and it was really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, Sean of the '90s, back when I was floating around the scene, especially, he was a nightmare.
Yeah, yeah. And you hear those stories and then you meet the guy knowing that, he's different and he's at the time, I can't remember what year this was, just 5, 6, 7 years ago, something.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a completely different guy than the stories that you hear. He was
Yeah.
really great.
Yeah. That's awesome. See, that's good. You got to meet the good Sean.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh, it's too funny. So
Yeah.
okay, so you're going through wrestling, and
Hmm.
you had taken music had taken the back seat for a little bit.
Hmm.
When did you start bringing music back in? Was there something that sparked it, or just you're missing of creating music and making music, or
Well, the first time I released something in a long time, because I was used to doing CDs and stuff like that. I didn't do
right?
the streaming and all that. Was actually during COVID
Okay.
because I had time.
Hmm.
So as I'm sitting here and I wasn't wrestling illegally at all, and I had extra time on my hands because my wrestling schedule was really pulled back, and I started looking at songs that I had had and that I'd played out live before with the full band, and so I put the EP together, and it actually did better than I thought for somebody who had, in my mind, been out of the scene for a long time, and so I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I initially followed up with a song that's not available anymore, but a little while later I did a song called "This Way" that was a ballad, but I ended up taking it down because the production wasn't what I wanted it to be. But and again, didn't do too bad. And then a few years went by, and now I'm doing wrestling, heavy duty again. But my that music was still like kind of in there, and I was playing more shows, and starting to kind of get back out there that way.
Hmm.
And then all the inspiration came to do Whispers in the Dark. And once I did that EP, that was that was it. Like I was like hooked back in. I'm writing. I have, if I go through the voice memos in my phone, there's all kinds of ideas, melodies, lyrics, strumming, anything that can keep it going. And it was that inspiration. And Roxy had a lot to do with that, and she inspired me so much that it was like it just came pouring out of me like I didn't have a choice. You
Wow.
know what I mean? So, and then, fast forward a couple of years, or a year and a half, 2 years, whatever it is, since that EP, with Break Free, it was just another one of those sparks where, the inspiration came. And then as the song started building, and it came out of nowhere and got, put together with all of us, it was one of those like, oh, now you could start to hear my love of like the 80s hair metal and stuff like, you know what I mean?
Right.
And now it's just like full blown, like flowing through me. So yeah, I have to give her credit for all the inspiration of like this stuff is pouring out of me. So
All right. Well, let's tell everybody who Roxy is. I'll let you take the wheel.
So Roxy Petrucci, drummer of Vixen and Madam X and VIP After Show. I got my Madam X T-shirt on
I
right here.
love that shirt. Hey, cheers to Roxy, a little red wine for my fellow paisan.
All right, and yeah, so we started dating, and yeah, I mean, I never lost my love of music to the point where I didn't listen to music. So
Yeah.
I was still really obsessed with music. I just wasn't playing it as much. So I was still going to concerts and listening to all my favorite, 80s hair bands because that's my favorite thing in the world.
Mhm.
And started my podcast and with being on the road with wrestling and music, I learned that I like to talk to people and get to know their stories and how they got to where they got to,
Sure.
and which kind of led me on a direct path to her, and then it was a domino effect from there.
All right, so let me ask you this about Roxy.
Hmm.
Um, which one do I want to ask first? I'll ask this one first. You start dating Roxy.
Hmm.
Is it is it intimidating to at first want to make music in front of her or with her involved? I mean, she's amazing fucking drummer
Hmm.
extraordinaire. One of the greatest drummers of all time. History of, like you said, Madam X,
Hmm.
Vixen, VIP After Show. She knows her shit.
Hmm.
Amazing person. And then it's like, oh, this is like fucking Roxy, who's been around the world a million fucking times, playing to millions of people, and I'm gonna play my song now.
Yeah,
It's got to be intimidating.
it is. So the first, at first we didn't really talk about my music at all. She was aware of it. She'd listened to Angels and Demons because that was already out,
Okay.
and she was complimentary, but I think she was just being nice. And we mainly we talked about her music and my wrestling. But when I did start, showing her I wrote this and I have this and sending her demos and ideas and stuff that I had recorded, she liked it and she was, complimentary of, my vocals and stuff like that. So I think that put me at ease. But as far as break free and stuff like that, I wanted her advice more than anything because I wanted her to tell me if it wasn't good, if it
Right.
needed to change, how I can make it sound the way that I needed it to sound to run with the big boys. You know what I mean? It was one of those things, and she did, and she didn't hold back. And even if I didn't want to hear it, and even if I did a complete rewrite of all the lyrics because after I demoed it and we started playing with it, she called me and she was like, "You can do better." And I literally scrapped about 90% of the lyrics, kept 10% of it, and wrote around those 10% and redid the whole thing. And same thing when I would send vocals and she, put some backing vocals here, stuff like that. And, the mixes, the final mixes, if the mix wasn't good enough, she wasn't holding back. Absolutely not. Raise this, lower that, tell him this, tell him that. And so in a sense, is it intimidating? Maybe a little bit, but at the same time, it was what I wanted her
Yeah.
to be like. So I can't really say it was intimidating. More like I needed that honesty that only your partner's going to give you.
Yeah.
You
That's
know what I mean?
that's awesome. Now, how about the wrestling? Does she say "What the fuck are you doing? You're gonna kill yourself"? Like,
So that actually changed because at first she was all about it. She was all for it, and she couldn't wait to see clips. She couldn't wait to see matches. She's come to a couple matches and watched live for herself, and and then as we get closer and time goes on, it's you better be careful and oh my god, I hate when you do matches like that or you know what I mean. But at first it was just oh yeah, cool, show me, and now it's what
that's so funny. That's
Yeah, yeah. Quick story for you. She comes to a match of mine in Niagara Falls, New York,
okay.
and I won't name names because I don't want to embarrass anybody. But we're standing at my merch table, and this guy walks in, and you know how the wrestling business works. It's around the room, shake everybody's hand, hi, hi, hi,
Yeah.
hi. So he comes to me and I put my hand out and he barely grabs my fingertips, doesn't even look at me, turns immediately to her. Oh my God, I'm such a big fan. It's so crazy that you're here. And he starts like, doing that whole thing. And she's like, oh yeah, cool, cool. And she's super nice to him. And we get to the locker room and he's like, dude, I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was going to be here. Caught me off guard. I freaked out. I was like, it's all good, man.
That's freaking awesome. That is so.
Yeah.
It's like it's weird. Like I have this weird connection with Roxy because, and she probably doesn't remember this, but I've interviewed her twice. The
Mhm.
first time I interviewed her, it was about 10 years ago when
Mhm.
Madam X first got together. I interviewed all four of them one by one.
Oh, cool.
But when I did Roxy's interview, my sister was she was literally dying at the time,
Oh, well, I'm
and
sorry.
my niece was like earlier that day she said, the doctor's saying today, might be the day or whatever,
Hmm.
and do this amazing interview with Roxy. We literally are in the midst of wrapping it up, and my phone just starts ringing. It's my niece. And I'm like, fuck. So, like, I always
Yeah.
now connect that with Roxy. It's
Yeah.
great. And here's the crazier thing. So at the time, I was hosting a podcast, and I had a co-host, and when she came on the second time I interviewed her, she came on my show, and I fucking interview her, and my co-host, his sister passed away.
Oh, wow.
So it's like she's got like I'm out of sisters, so it's all good,
Well,
Rock.
I am sorry to hear that happened.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy stuff. So so Break Free. You said you
Mhm.
rewrote the lyrics. Was it always called Break Free though?
Yes, that part actually stayed the same,
Okay.
but I sang it different. So when I came back through, and part of that was also on my co-writer David Julian, who was also the co-writer on 10,000 Volts for Ace Frehley.
Okay.
And so he was like, make it something that we can do like a gang vocal for,
Mm,
and because I was kind of drawing it out like singing it instead of
yeah.
just that break free that it is now. And so we kept that in, and I just kind of wrote around it, and move this here, change this completely, take this out, and I recut the demo and I sent it to him, I sent it to her, and they were both like, "That's the one." And we just kind of, because like I said, this song came together out of nowhere. Like there was no plan to do this song, there was no talk of doing this song. It literally was just like fell into my lap, and then
Wow.
now it's like this. I call it a super group because I have Roxy on drums, and David Julian, the co-writer, worked with Ace Frehley, Jack Russell, and Steve Brown from Trickster, and on bass is Todd from Bad Marriage,
Right.
and it just kind of like happened that way, and it all again stemmed from my podcast because the guy who produced my last release, Whispers in the Dark, was in a band with David called Last Conservative, and David's favorite music is 80s hair metal, just like mine. He loves Warren D. Martini and
Mm,
Ace Frehley and all that stuff. So of course TJ says to me, "Hey, you should interview Dave because he just got a couple songs on the new Ace Frehley record." Cool. So I interviewed Dave after talking, after we stopped recording. And I'd known these guys for a long time. I grew up going to see them play.
sure.
And he was like, would you want to, write something together? And then we kind of got a little something there. And then all of a sudden it was, hey, Rox, do you want to like take a listen to this? And if you like it, do you want to throw some drums on it? She liked it. She put the drums on it. Hey, Todd, you think you want to do a song with me and Rox? Absolutely. I would love to. And it's just kind of like, whoa, you know? So
All right. Is there a Robbie Vegas band? Is there going to be any shows or?
that's what we're talking about now. So obviously for the live shows, I'm still doing either acoustic shows or duets. So but it hasn't been full band in a long time. But now that the music's getting out there more and it's full band recordings, yes,
Mhm.
I want to do that. So I have to figure out my lineup because obviously I can't have Todd and Roxy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I have some things to play with, but it's been going through my head, and right now we're already working on another two songs.
Okay.
So me and David are doing that, and we're playing around with two pretty good ones already. And so I think the next step logically would be put the band and have the Robby Vegas band. So
Would there be a rock and wrestling show?
there is a promoter who wants to do that. His name is Dave, and he runs in upstate New York. He runs Extreme Wrestling Force. He's a huge ECW fan,
Okay.
so we do a lot of shows with a lot of ECW originals. And he wants to do a rock and wrestling show. And he's even talked about bringing in Madam X. Like that's how much he
That would be
wants to.
awesome. That would
That's
be
how
awesome.
much he wants to make this happen. And I would love to do that because I've never done a rock and wrestling show together. I've definitely played on the same day, like I've wrestled and then left and played a gig at like a
That's
bar.
a totally different double shot.
Exactly, exactly.
It's funny back in like I was in the original version of ECW and
Hmm.
then the extreme version of ECW. And in the original version, one of my good friends who was a tattoo artist and also played in this punk band throughout Philly,
Hmm.
the Cosmic Commander. Um, we remained very good friends. We would get tattooed from and all. And a lot of the ECW guys started getting tattooed from him. And then he's like, Bay, I'm going to do a rock and wrestling show. I'm like, okay. Like, what do you? Okay. But he was like all into the whole punk world, and he had all these friends. So he put together this true. It was what was it called? Rule Breakers Rule was the name of the show,
Hmm.
and I wrestled on it, and there was like 5 matches, and I think 3 bands. But one, the headlining band was Annie Scene, so it was like a real blood and guts punk rock wrestling. It was crazy. It was just absolutely crazy. And Balls Mahoney was on there doing his old like he used to do like a chic gimmick. It was crazy. Good times.
You know, I actually I performed on a punk rock wrestling show in November up in somewhere in Canada. Maybe
Really? Okay.
Kitchener, so maybe Kitchener, and that what they did was they would have 2 matches
Yeah.
and then a band, and then 2 matches and then a band, and it went like that all night. And it was a really good time. And Gangrel was on the show, and I ended
Oh,
up
nice.
just hanging with him all night. But it was a really interesting, fun
He's
time.
he's a great dude.
He is. He's awesome. I've done a few shows with him, and he's one of my listeners. He listens to my tunes,
That's awesome. That is
and I've
awesome.
I've I've worked with a lot of guys that I'm sure you know because I've worked with a lot of ECW people. HC Loke, I've
Yeah.
faced many
You know
times.
what? He came in after I was gone, but I
Okay.
remember seeing, yeah.
Yep. Angel Orsini, the Prodiget. She's a
Yeah.
great friend of mine. I've teamed with Tommy Dreamer. I've faced Super Crazy. So many shows with Rhino, Shane Douglas. Yeah, like the list goes on, and they're always such a pleasure.
I used to bring Shane. You'll love this. It was before Kiss put out what were they called? The original, not the album, the originals from the '70s, but they were
Hmm.
putting up. They started opening up the vault, the video vaults,
Yeah, yeah.
and the video history, whatever the Kissology. I think maybe it was Kissology.
Oh, the Kistery
Yeah.
DVDs. Yeah.
Before they put them out, they started like the bootleggers started putting
Hmm.
everything out, and I had all that stuff, and it was right back when Kiss started. They put the makeup back on and did the reunion tours, and it was a big buzz in ECW at the time. And I remember when they played Philly. They played Philly 3 or 4 nights, and we
Hmm.
were all there. Like the ECW was there in force, and I used to bring the bootlegs to Shane so he can see everything.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so
Yeah,
funny.
yeah,
Yeah, he's a nice guy, and
yeah.
I've done a ton of shows. Actually, one not too long ago. But yeah, it's crazy, small world how everybody seems to be tied together once you're in music and wrestling.
It is funny. They do go so hand in hand, and
Hmm.
there was, I'll put it this way, there was so much ugliness, but
Hmm.
now we get older, more mature, and learn to turn your back to the ugly,
Yeah.
and it's actually just a beautiful thing because
Hmm.
both businesses, both arts are just amazing. And when they're on, like you listen to the Beatles, you listen to Kiss, listen to Vixen, listen to Madame X. it's
Hmm.
just beautiful art. And then when you watch a Shawn Michaels match,
Yep.
an ECW match, super crazy.
Yeah.
Just a beautiful art, and it gives you like just talking about it, I have chills.
Oh yeah. I mean, standing across the ring from Super Crazy was a match that I never knew I wanted, but I definitely needed it. Um, you have your list of guys. Everybody's got their list in
Sure.
the back of their mind. Like, I want to work with this guy, this guy, this guy. And when I got the call about working with Super Crazy, I was immediately like,
Mm.
yeah, that'll be, and God, like it was such a good match, and I learned so much from him. And he didn't really speak in English
Yeah.
at all, like just like little things here and there. So it was just one of those things where it's like, well, let's see. It was a triple threat match. It was myself, Super Crazy, and Julio Diamante, and it was just I can't even explain it. It was just that match that I didn't know I needed it, but I'm so glad I had it.
That's
You
awesome.
know.
That's awesome. Wow. So all right, so what like what's your schedule like now? Like is it mostly wrestling based? Or you
Yes, especially going into the winter months because I was on the road with Vixen most of the summer,
okay?
but I was little curve offs to do matches here and there and a couple gigs too. But my last few gigs of the year are going to be in the next few weeks. So I'm actually playing on Friday this week. So what is that in 2 days?
Okay.
And next weekend I'll actually be wrestling Friday in Canada. Saturday I'll be back in Clarence, New York for a gig, and then Sunday I'll be out in Lyons, New York, which is way the hell away from Clarence, um, with for another match, and then the following weekend a match for me that's local, which is nice. No travel for the Buffalo show, and then after that hit the road with Vixen briefly, and then back to another 3 weeks of wrestling in New York and Pennsylvania.
Cool. Look at you.
Yep.
So we had a question from my buddy Hub. Break Free is a great song. Do you have a whole album, and who was your producer?
I have multiple EPs that are out. I don't like to say album only because they're 5 to 6 songs each. Break Free is not on either one, though. That is just released as a single. But you can get Angels and Demons and Whispers in the Dark. If you do listen to Whispers in the Dark, it is a lot more mellow than Angels and Demons and is a lot more mellow than Break Free. There's only one like real hard rockin' track on there called Burning Desire. And there's like a blues rock song. And then there's 3 ballads. So I really tapped into a different style of music for the Whispers in the Dark EP. The producer for Whispers in the Dark was T.J. Zindel. You could check out his stuff as well, not just with the Last Conservative Band, but his solo stuff. Now, the producer for Break Free, I have to shout out 2 people because David Julian did a great job with his producing and mixing and mastering, and he had help and advice from Anthony Fox, who did a lot of producing for Buck Cherry, Steven Tyler. He played the drummer in Wayne's World 1 and 2 in Cassandra's band.
He was in
And
the Beautiful Creatures, one of my
he was in the
favorite bands.
beautiful. Oh God, they're one of my favorite bands of all time.
A
And
band that should have been fucking huge.
I agree. I agree. One of
Drives
the
me insane.
first time I saw him live, I fell in love. DJ Ash was a wonderful guitar player
Yeah,
and a cool
yeah,
dude. And Michael Thomas, who was in the band for a while, who's a buddy of mine, is just killing it with Adler
yeah.
right now. The production was primarily done by David, but we had a lot of pointers and do this, do that's from Anthony Fox of Beautiful Creatures, and he's got a lot of production under his belt. So
Going back to Beautiful Creatures, one night I went, and this was years ago. This was probably like 15 years ago. I went and saw L.A. Guns play a small place in Delaware when I was living in Philly still,
mhm.
and Kenny Queens was playing bass for him at the time, and I got kind of fucking shit faced drunk, and I just started hollering. I was hollering, "Beautiful Creature!" Kenny was like, "Shut up!"
Oh man, underrated band, especially the first record. Not that the second one
Yeah,
wasn't good, but the first one was almost perfect.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
So now the rock star Robbie Vegas, was that always your gimmick? Was it always the rock star?
Uh, no. So I always use Robbie Vegas for music and for wrestling. And,
Okay.
when I first broke into wrestling, it never occurred to me to just be me. Like, this is the way that I dress. This is the way that I am all the time. So I was just kind of just going out there, just trying to be a flashy, cool wrestler.
Hmm.
And I can't even tell you now, and whoever is going to hear this and be like, it was me, but I don't even know who said, like, dude, you do the fucking rock star thing. Why aren't you doing that? And I was
Right.
like, uh, can I? and like, and then everything just kind of took off. I started doing the cool rock star pants, and like I already had all the clothes because that's how I dressed my whole life.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden everything started clicking, and then I became a better wrestler because I felt comfortable. I was in my own skin. I could,
Right.
I was more comfortable on the mic. I was more comfortable in the ring. I was more comfortable with how I looked, how I dressed, how I acted, and everything just kind of fell into place. And it was kind of that moment where I kind of was like, duh, why didn't you do that all along? But when you're green, you're just nervous.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
think those things. You're just happy to be there. You know.
Have you been able to like cross paths the fans, like take some of your wrestling fans and make them music fans, and vice versa?
Some, some. There's a lot of crossover in music and wrestling, I feel, and I think now I'm getting to the point where I'm getting that more. So before I kind of had like separate fan bases, and I think now they're one, and the ones that haven't been are now starting to cross. It's easier for the wrestling fans to cross over into the music than it is for the music fans to cross over into wrestling. I've noticed, but there is a few.
And you know it's so crazy because, and I still kind of like can't believe it, but the wrestling business is so huge now,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's mind blowing to me.
And I'll tell you, it actually. This is kind of like a side story, but not, not. The first time I got my face on WWE TV, that's when I realized how powerful wrestling and the wrestling fans could be because not only did my sales start going up on my pro wrestling tee store from my t-shirts,
Mhm.
but the fans at shows were coming up to me with printed out pictures from Monday Night Raw and SmackDown and all, and stuff that they just printed themselves. Like, I knew that was you. Can you say, you know what I mean? And
Right.
then my music downloads started going up. And I was like, wow, now it wasn't so much shocking in the wrestling world, but when I started to see a change in music and podcast listens, that's when I was like, the reach is beyond wrestling here,
That's awesome.
you know?
That's awesome. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't touched on that yet. The whole podcast world. Now,
hmm
what is your podcast?
The All Bets Are Off podcast with Robby Vegas. I primarily interview rock stars, professional wrestlers, and horror movie actors. I
Okay.
am known to occasionally do cryptozoologists, paranormal investigators, and I've even had a couple authors. But the main three things are those as far as interviews go. And then we do like album breakdowns, movie reviews, top 10 rankings, top 5 rankings, things like that, where we're not doing guests. But I've managed to have some pretty amazing guests: Bruce Kulick from Kiss, Kip Winger,
Nice.
Dee Snider, all of Vixen, Ace Von Johnson, who's a buddy of mine from LA
Mhm.
Guns. Um, the list goes on. A bunch of the guys from Wednesday 13, who I absolutely love, and opened up for them a
Awesome.
couple times.
Love
Which
Wednesday.
I feel, oh my God, he's a genius. I got to open up for him when I was 21, and then again when I was 22.
Wow.
And I'm real good friends with Jack and Troy, and I'm starting to get to know Mike, who also played in Wasp. And they're a great band, and those guys all come on the show, and we talk. I interview them, and then we talk about Kiss, and then it turns into let's do a whole Kiss podcast. Like,
That's awesome.
same thing with Michael Thomas from Beautiful Creatures and
Yeah.
Adler and all that. Like, he comes on, and then he comes back, and we do the Kiss podcast. So
It's funny. No matter who you are in music, you can turn your podcast into a Kiss podcast in 3 seconds.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's funny too because you don't realize how much that ties us all together. Steve Brown, for example, from Trickster, when
Yeah.
he came on my show, he had just helped produce or did produce 10,000 Volts with Ace
Hmm.
Frehley, and he's one of the boys. He's a Kiss fan. He was
Yeah.
excited about it, and I love Steve, and I love seeing Steve play, and I love going out and seeing them in person, and those guys are just wonderful human beings, and it's cool because growing up loving those bands and loving that kind of music, and then you get older and you become a part of that world. It's very surreal, and not a day goes by that I'm not grateful for it. I never take a second for granted, and I know that I'm very lucky to be where I'm at. And these guys make me feel even more so. Guys like the Bad Marriage guys and Joey Casada and all those guys. Even though Joey Licious can
Where, I was
kiss
gonna
my
say,
ass.
where is Joey Licious in all this?
Joey Licious is at war with Robby Vegas right now, and it's the showdown in the century, and it's going to happen. He's trying to get Chris Jericho involved, which I'm totally against that because I'm the music, wrestling guy. Jericho needs to take a back seat right now because me and Joey got to figure this out. And I got Todd on my side, I got the Vixen girls on my side, and now Joey's trying to recruit Steve Brown and PJ Farley, and it's just going to be a big brawl.
Oh shit! Oh shit! It's going to all implode.
He keeps calling it the showdown of the century, and if you go on my YouTube channel, there's 3 videos that'll walk you through exactly what's going on between me and Joey Licious before I break his nose.
Oh, that's hysterical. That is so funny. Oh, so all right, so Break Free. The single is out there. Is
Yes.
there going to be a video at all? Or?
I was actually thinking about just doing a lyric video for this one
Okay.
because people seem to really dig the lyrics, and but we're going to see what happens with the next 2 songs that we're working on, and maybe do an actual video for one of those.
Okay.
So we're just kind of play that by ear because we didn't expect to be working on another song so quickly. The song's only been out for a little over 2 weeks, and I love the feedback I'm getting. And again, thank you to the person who asked the question and said that they love the song. But it's in the back of my mind to keep taking everything a step further. So we're just going to kind of see what happens from here.
Yeah. Do it, dude. I mean, especially like you said, like that one just kind of came and flowed out. If it's flowing and coming out, fucking take it and run with it, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at because the song wasn't even supposed to happen, and it did, and it came out of nowhere, and I love the song, and I think it's some of my best work. And again, getting a lot of good feedback from it is always a huge plus. And it's out on literally every platform you could think of. It's on 150 streaming platforms. So if anybody who's listening to this hasn't heard it or they're just a wrestling fan, check it out. Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Google, YouTube, just check it out.
I didn't even know there was 150 platforms.
I didn't either. I was told that that's how many it's on.
That's frightening.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, all right, Robby, where is the best place for everybody to get hold of you, find the song? Obviously, it's on 150 platforms, so just
Mhm.
you can find it. It's impossible not to find.
Yeah.
And also, you have a wrestling school. Where is the wrestling school if anybody would like to be trained?
So the wrestling school is in Depew, New York, just outside of Buffalo, Buffalo Wrestling Academy. We've
Okay.
been around for a few years now. We already have students that are working shows. They're traveling. They're working different states. They're working in Canada, and they're doing great. A lot of them are holding championships right now. So, we tell you we're going to get it done, and we get it done, and we offer a lot of seminars. We've had the NWA Heavyweight Champion, EC3, host 2 seminars for us already.
Nice.
We HC Loke from ECW has done a seminar for us. And that's just, off the top of my head, but there's been tons. These kids go to seminars constantly, but those were just some that we personally hosted. You can find me on all social media. So the podcast is on X, Instagram, and Facebook under ABAO Pod. That's All Bets Are Off Pod. And then I am mostly going to be found on Instagram, although I am on everything. Instagram is Robby_Vegas_official. And you could subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can subscribe to me on Spotify, subscribe to me on Apple, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts. Those subscriptions matter. As you know, they help. So anybody listening to this who isn't following me on social media or subscribing to my platforms, please do so. My Pro Wrestling Tees store is just prowrestlingtees.com/rockstarRobbyVegas. And I see a question here about working with Ryan Roxy. I'm not opposed to working with anybody. I I do have a couple special guests that are going to collaborate with me on the next couple songs. I cannot say who they are right now because knowing my luck, if I do, it won't happen. So, so I just have to make sure that everything's locked in and recorded before I tell you guys who some special guests that I have in my back pocket right now for the next few songs. And yeah, so that's where you could find me. So yeah, follow me on Instagram and all of my music and podcasting platforms.
That's awesome. Robby, this has been amazing, man. Glad to finally meet you, finally
Yeah,
talk to you. And yeah, we got to cross paths amongst some wrestling, some music, and life.
absolutely. And hey, you never know. We may end up on a wrestling show together somewhere down the line.
Hey, you never know. I don't get in the ring no more because, as you see, I have a lot of these gray hairs. And I actually just had 5 fucking heart attacks a few months ago. So,
Oh wow.
yeah,
Oh
like
Jesus.
I'm working on this thing that I can't announce yet until the
Hmm.
28th is when we officially announce it. But
Hmm.
I initially said, all right, I'm going to get back in the ring and do my farewell match. And I
Hmm.
was told, are you fucking crazy? No, you're not.
Yeah.
I was like, all right.
As a wrestler, you are inclined to always be like, I could do one more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I was told by multiple people, no, you're not.
Hey, you never know though. What happens down the line. But again, we might cross paths anyway. For all we know, you could be promoting a show. You know what I mean?
Hey, hey,
So,
we are going to cross paths. I know that. And
well, I
plus,
look forward to
I'm
it.
in Nashville. I'm in Music City. Get your fucking ass down here.
My cousin is a country singer in Nashville.
There you go.
True story.
Come
So
visit. Come visit your cousin. There's a lot
I
of wine to drink.
I could visit my cousin. I could visit Mr. Sam Wall, who just moved down there, who's a great musician himself, and Tyson Leslie is down
Yeah,
there, and
they
Ace
just
Von Johnson and Mark Slaughter, and
let's say they just did Tyson's 50th birthday the other night at the Basement East.
yes, they did. They did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I know a
Cool.
handful. Oh, I think Ryan Cook and Hollywood are down there too, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They
Yeah,
are.
I know both of them. So
There you go. Everybody's down here. Come on down.
yeah, I just may.
There you go. Robby, this has been awesome. Thanks so much, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. It was a blast. I feel like we didn't even scratch the surface. That's how much fun this was. It just flew by.
Next time we're going to be eating macaroni as true Italians, because I don't know if you're Italian or not, but
I
you're
am.
Italian now. Hey,
I
hey, we're going to eat some fucking macaroni. We're going to have more red wine, and we are going to just lay it all on the table.
Hey, if I knew this was a red wine kind of thing, I got a couple bottles sitting over here. I would open one.
Hey, come on! I'm drinking Paisano right now, Carlo Rossi.
Oh man, thank you so much for having me. This was
You're
fun.
welcome, man. Congrats on everything, and I can't wait for the new tune.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And everybody download Break Free or stream it and let's get those numbers up. I see those numbers. We keep pumping out more music.
There you go. It's very simple. All it takes is a stream, a like, a comment. It's all you got to do. It doesn't cost you a freaking thing.
That's it.
Just share the love,
Yep.
and the numbers will rise, and so will Robby, and so will everybody else.
Yep. Hit subscribe, hit follow, do what you got to do and I'll be here and I'll be thanking each and every one of you.
There you go. On that note, have a good night, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.